good evening. Let's look at Bollinger Band. So we're looking at what Bollinger Band is. So it's basically an envelope, and how that envelope is created, we'll look in the slides ahead. But this is some sort of envelope in which this particular, at least this stock seems to be moving. And can you see there is a middle line also? There is a middle line also. Can you see that? Yeah.
Yes,
So
yes.
we'll try and understand what is that middle line. All we understand is somehow on this screenshot that you have got, or this image that you have, there is an upper band and there is lower band. So that is observation number one. This is observation number two. And the other thing here is that whenever it touches the upper band, sometimes you would see this corrects, and when it touches the lower band, you would see that this moves upward and crosses this one and moves further, and you would see this happening. So but however, the you so there are two kinds of observation, I'll say. One, the stock touches the upper band and keeps on moving, sometimes reverses from the mid of the this envelope or this band, as you call it. Sometimes it touches the top of the band and then falls and keeps continuously falling. That's observation number two. It touches the lower band, crosses the middle line, and then touches the upper band, and then falls and touches the lower band. And this happens couple of times. But this sort of behavior is also possible, where it does not correct after touching the upper side of the band. Point number one. The other side of the observation, or the other side of the coin is that the stock, despite the touching the lower band, it is still keeps correcting before, after, and then after some time it starts moving. So it is not necessary, as you see in this case, that it touches the upper band and then corrects, or it touches the upper band just once and corrects, touches the upper band maybe once or twice and corrects. There are periods when this just keeps on moving ahead, and there are periods when it just keeps on moving ahead. So, uh, but how is this band derived? So we'll go to the tool and try and understand this. But this is the takeaway from this particular side. Let's move on to the uh, next slide. But before I introduce you this, let me open Bollinger Bands. I'll remove all other technical indicators, just to be very clear as to what we are speaking here right now. And I will add Bollinger Bands here for your comfort. Now, what is the observation that you see? This is a Bollinger Band from the real life. So this is standard platforms, right? And do you see that when the stock in scenario one, the stock touches the upper end of the band and just keeps on moving? So this is a bullish and an extra bullish phase, I would say. The stock touches the upper end of the band and corrects and continuously keeps on correcting. Sometimes it touches the band once, lower band once, and then moves up. So we have scenario analysis 1 here, we have scenario 2 here, we have scenario 3 where it continuously corrects, then we have scenario 4 here where it touches once and moves up. So are you all synced in as to how this operates? There are different possibilities, I guess. Yes. The second point that I want to bring to you is, do you see that sometimes the distance between the channel reduces? Yes or no?
Yes, sir.
I hope you see that the distance between the channel reduces, right? It is constricted. It is, it's not as wide as you see at other places, and these are uh, some of the places. So what is Bollinger Band all about? So before I introduce Bollinger Band to you, I am just gonna click on the Bollinger Band setting and help you understand what Bollinger Band is about. So what Bollinger Band is all about is it plots SMA, which is simple moving average of the stock over a 20-day period. So it is on the closing price of the stock, it is mapping the simple moving average. So which is this orange line that you see right here. As you can see, there is an orange line which, so this is a 20 days moving average. So then the question is, what is this blue line on the top and on the bottom side of it? So we will double click on this one and go back and see what this says. Do you read standard deviation here? So for every point that you see, orange point that you see, for example, if you're seeing this point, it will map plus 2 standard deviation from this point and minus 2 standard deviation from here, which gives it the band. So plus 2 standard deviation from this particular point, and what is that point? Say this is the point, and minus 2 standard deviation from this one. This is the band. Basically, for those who do not understand what standard deviation is all about, it is like from this point, if I take 2 steps, so how far can I go? Just because I take 2 steps. If I take 2 steps back, what is the farthest point I can go? So that is what standard deviation is all about. But you're not just taking only 2 steps in one direction, you're taking 2 steps in 2 direction. This I would call as plus 2 standard deviation. It is on the upside. You are going below the SMA, simple moving average, which you have looked in the previous classes, and this is known as 2 minus 2 standard deviation. So for every point you are mapping, what is the maximum possibility plus 2 standard deviation and minus 2 standard deviation. The question is, why is that done? There must be some logic behind that. Why plus 2 and why minus 2? So if you have ever studied statistics in your life, I think this they introduced at a very early age, maybe in 11th grade. If you have studied mathematics or statistics, I am sure you would have seen bell curve. Has any one of you seen bell curve or something like this?
सबसे ज़्यादा इसी का यूज करते हैं.
HR, the guys are the one who do the most. Yes. So what does plus and minus 2 standard deviation talk about? So if this is the average point, say, if this is mean, if this is the average point, right? If I can plot this, if this is mean, right? Just hypothetical.
एक सेकंड आपको
maybe a little tilted, but I'm talking about.
मुझे याद आ रहा है ये
हाँ.
कर्व का बेस जो आप बोल रहे हो, जब हम पीटी करते थे बचपन में स्कूल में, 2 हाथ आगे जगह छोड़ दो, 2 हाथ पीछे छोड़ दो जगह, जिससे कि फ्रीली मूव कर सके.
हाँ, थोड़ी सी आवाज आपकी थोड़ी सी लो है, so not very clear.
अभी is it better or
it is better, but थोड़ा सा आपको loudly
छोड़ो.
I missed the question.
नहीं, मैं बोल रहा हूँ ये जो मुझे बॉलिंगर बैंड दिख रहा है और जो आप समझा रहे हो, वो बचपन की वो याद दिलाता है कि स्कूल में जब पीटी करते थे कि 2 हाथ आगे जगह छोड़ दो, 2 हाथ पीछे जगह छोड़ दो, जिससे
पीछे जगह छोड़ दो.
एग्जैक्टली पीटी आराम से कर सके बिना किसी को टच किए.
एग्जैक्टली बहुत बढ़िया आपने एग्जैक्टली इट्स अ वेरी नाइस एग्जांपल दिया यू गिवन. करेक्ट. अब ये क्या बताता है y प्लस एंड माइनस 2 स्टैंडर्ड डिवीजन. ज्यादा स्टैटिस्टिक्स में आज नहीं जाएंगे, थोड़ा बहुत स्टैटिस्टिक्स वी हैव टुवर्ड्स द एंड ऑफ द सेशन आल्सो in this via this only. So basically standard deviation and this formation, which is known as normal distribution or bell curve, tells us what, right? We only have to take the implication of it, the takeaway from it. So what happens when you move 2 steps from the average? Say you have a data point, say 10-20 days of data. If you calculate a simple moving average, this you can also call as simple moving average. So you just calculated average or mean or mu, however you call it. This is the average. So from here plus 2 steps here and 2 steps here. This basically covers your 95% of the data. So if you go plus minus 1 standard deviation, it covers 68% of the data. this represents 95% of your this entire, if I can write this, so this entire thing represents 95% of all the occurrences of all the data sets. So so in a very simple language, what does that mean? Plus minus plus or minus 2 standard deviation. It means that you are talking about that in 95% of the cases, what is going to be the outcome, what is going to happen. In other words, if I just tweak my sentence, or if I change my sentence, all you are gonna say is that there is a 95% probability that the stock price may go here, or there's a 95% probability that the stock price may go.
नहीं, बट इसमें पुरातन ये तो पास्ट के परफॉर्मेंस को दिखा रहा है, फ्यूचर का कहाँ बता रहा है कि ये स्टॉक में गो
No, these are all lagging indicators. The way volatility is all based on historical volatility. Or sorry,
जैसे आप
volatility.
बाकी जो टूल बताते हो उसमें फ्यूचरिस्टिक दिखाता है, इसमें तो ये आगे जैसे टूल आगे गए ही नहीं कि फ्यूचरिस्टिक क्या रहेगा।
हाँ, मैं उस पे अभी आया नहीं, उसको इम्प्लीकेशन पे पहले आपको मैं इसका मैथमेटिक्स समझा रहा हूँ, which probably people don't explain कि what is the mathematics, why you have, first of all, why, where does this band come from. So when you calculate the average point, which is say this point that you are looking at, the orange point, is nothing but the data which is here, right? So if I can just mark it very clearly, we are talking about a data which is at the center, right? Why does it look like a bell curve? What is a bell curve? If you're not seeing, please do not really worry about it. But if you have ever come across a bell curve or a normal distribution curve, this SMA, this middle point, the average point that you're seeing represents this point on the graph. Point number one. Point number two, this point on the upper end that you are looking at represents nothing but within plus 2 standard deviations. It represents this particular data. So from the average, how far it is, from the simple moving average, how far this is. This -2 standard deviation basically represents, if you were to connect it on the lower end, this point basically represents -2 standard deviation. So all I am trying to say is we will look at different ways to read that, right? All I am saying is why this plus and -2 is plotted. So this is plotted because it covers 95% of the data set. But how do I understand 95% of the data set in a layman's language? So in a layman's language, in a non-statistical uh, terminology, plus and minus. So if you move 2 steps ahead and if you move 2 steps back, it reflects what can happen if in 95% of the case. Or when you say there is a 95% chance that it will rain today, there is a 95% chance that Tanla will move up. There is a 95% chance that Dr. Reddy's will go up. There is, or if I tweak my sentence even further, there is a 95% chance that Tanla may operate between these ranges. Now, if you want to measure that, that's a big range, I'm sure. Let's see this from here to here. If you want to measure, this is about a 30% deviation. So that's a big data set. If you want to read this here, just read about this one. So now where do you see? So you are saying 871 versus 650. So this is a normal range. I'm just trying to highlight this here. It is saying the average is 779. Sorry, the closing price is 779. It is not quoted. Yeah, so I think closing today is 761.60. The average is this point, which is 779, which is the simple moving average, this one. The closing price, as you see here, is below the below 779 or below the orange line. On the upper side, it is saying that there is a 95% chance that the stock can possibly go up to 867, and there is a 95% chance, it is within that 95% chance that stock can fall down to 690.